everybody for coming out. My name is Jamil Smith. I'm a senior writer with Rolling Stone magazine, and we appreciate you coming to this screening of BLACKkKLANSMAN and sticking around for the conversation. Without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. First up is Kwame Ture, Corey Hawkins. Whichever. Next up is the person who played David Duke, Mr. Topher Grace. Next up is Patrice Laura Harrier. And last but not least is Mr. Ron Stallworth himself, John David Washington. So I'll start there on the end. John David, Spike, when we did an interview with Spike for the current issue of Rolling Stone, and he reminded me that you were one of the young men at the end of Malcolm X, saying, "I am Malcolm X."
That's it.
How did he pitch you on becoming Ron Stallworth?
How did he pitch me? Spike didn't even pitch me. He did not need to pitch me. I mean, it was sort of a simple process. I got a text from Spike saying, "Yo, this Spike called me." I got with Spike, so I wasn't sure if it was him, but we were investigating, so I called him. I'm like, "Spike?" I got a script. Black detectives, first black detective, and he started whispering, "Black detective in Colorado Springs. Takes the KKK." Right, it was like, that's the case. I was like, I thought maybe, Dave Chappelle, this is going to be some sort of spoof or whatever. So he asked me again, like, "So where are you?" I'm in Cincinnati. He's like, "I'm on location." "All right, I'm going to send this a book." There's a book. I'm sending it to Cincinnati, Cincinnati. So the book. He's like, "Actually, a couple times, I know you heard me, but he has his own process." So, I get the book, I read it, and I am blown away. I couldn't believe it. I called him back like, "Spike, this is crazy, man." He says, I can't believe this really happened." But all right, bet, see you this summer.
Not your typical Hollywood negotiation. Laura, I want to ask you, my mother's here. She saw a lot of her college self in your character when we watched the film together.
Yeah,
Mom, stand up.
Mom?
That's my mom. Yeah. The line forms at the So yeah, she saw a lot of herself in that character that you played. Can you tell me a little bit of how you researched it and how you put Patrice together?
So Patrice kind of just, she wasn't a real person, so I just kind of tried to create this amalgamation of different women and people that I met through my research. So initially I met Kathleen Cleaver, who Spike introduced us to, and which was incredible. I mean, he had us all into his house, and we just got to hear her life story and how she got to Snake and then the Panthers, and meeting Eldridge, what her whole story was. And then from there, I read a lot of Angela Davison's books and her autobiography and watched a lot of interviews with her. And then I contacted people who were in the BSU at Colorado College in the early 70s, just normal people now, and kind of just wanted to hear their stories and their life experience. But also talking to members of my family, like my aunts, and they were involved in the movement. My dad as well. I watched a lot of films and we listened to music from the early 70s. Just kind of tried to draw from all these different places to create Patrice.
In that scene where you both are debating film representation, blaxploitation, was there any of that stuff that you hadn't seen, or had you drawn inspiration from that kind of stuff before?
I watched those films, for the movie, obviously.
Right.
But yes, we definitely watched a bunch of blaxploitation movies. But I'd seen them before because my dad is really into them. So we watched Blackula, if anyone's seen that. It's a great film. I tried to watch a bunch of accusation, and then watching a bunch of Soul Train helps for sure.
Topher, I saw an interview that Spike and the real Ron Stallworth did with Lester Holt this last week or early this week, in which they revealed that David Duke called Ron the other day on the phone.
It's like 5 days ago, yeah.
Because he is concerned with his portrayal in the film. The former Grand Wizard of the KKK is worried that you made him look stupid. What are your thoughts on that?
He was like hoping for Brad Pitt or something. Well, that was something that I really liked about the script before I even met with Spike, which was that some movies, which I would say in retrospect are actually kind of irresponsible. These guys, they'll have guys that are the bad guys, and they're definitely the bad guys, but they're kind of cool.
Nice.
And you kind of like, you can see where someone could misread the film. What I loved about this is that these guys are idiots. Like at the end, like they blow themselves up. Like what happens to me, I get my ass handed to me like in the worst way possible at the end. Like I just thought, you got to be careful who you're working with. I didn't want to play this role for anyone but Spike. But it's because of reasons like that he goes through the script and makes sure that no one's watching this from another context and thinking these guys look cool.
Corey, like Star Wars interactions with Duke, the Kwame Ture scene is taken pretty much directly from the memoir. Can you speak a little bit to how that speech and also the police harassment scene afterwards kind of speak to how this film informs upon what we're going through today?
Well, I think there are just so many parallels. I think right now we're going through this period politically where there's a lot of distraction, and it's so easy for all of us because we become so numb to the constant barrage of tomfoolery that it's so easy to forget. And
Right.
I think, for one, Spike is great at reminding us as citizens, what our responsibility is. And so I was grateful to kind of step in the shoes of Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, if only for however many minutes on screen time. And Spike, when he calls you and he says, I need you to come. I just need 2 days, man. I just need you, whatever you need.
Right.
You need me for 2 months, 2 years. I'm there. But I was aware of the huge legacy and shoes that I was sort of stepping in, and so you got to step correctly. And so there was a lot of research and conversation into forming that and that dialogue. But speaking of the parallels, in one of his speeches, he talked about being black and shot in the back like dogs in the streets by white racist cops. And the goosebumps that you get when you're delivering this to a room full of background artists who hadn't heard these words before in 2018, it's chilling. And then right after that, to be there's a parallel of the scene. You see this man who's talking about love of self and love of each other and love of your nose and your lips and your hair and reaching out, and then you turn and you see this man who had all this power, sort of being accosted by the police, and then across from him is a black woman who looks to him for protection and looks up to him as a student of the Black Student Union, a member of the Black Student Union, and being accosted by these cops as well. And so it's just eerie how art imitates life, man, and how Spike, I call him a curator of the culture for a reason, because he's always there to just kind of push it.
Yeah, I wanted to actually open up to the panel. I mean, Spike's films, a lot of us grew up on Spike's films, and I wanted to, obviously, John David, you have your own perspective on this, but I wanted to get an idea of what in Spike's filmography really drove you when you were younger, when you saw it that really had an effect on you. Anyone can chime in. By all means.
Malcolm X. I mean, I had such a pivotal role in that. No, but but there's no such thing as small parts, only small actors. So
That's right.
So, but yeah, I mean, the Jungle Fever as well. It depends on the month, you know. You know what I mean? Like, it's just what he was able to do, and I felt a part of this was celebrate and the differences within our culture. You know, we're not just playing Pimp number 5, Gangster number 4 on the call sheet. You know, we're able to be weird, we can be different, we can be out, you know, we can be soft-spoken. All these different kinds of colors and characters within our culture was put on a platform, and I've never seen anything like that. I mean, when I saw Rosie Perez, I fell in love. I fell in love with her. Low key, my eye, low key. Like, I was like, yo. I'm like more than 10. I'm like, who is that? So much history. And being able to be a part of that during the rehearsal process, you're seeing all these posters, and we rehearsed in 40 acres of Brooklyn, and it made me feel like this Hall of Fame, like this museum. And it was so encouraging, inspiring to know that I'm connected with, you know, the Mookies of the world and Rosie Perez. I'm gonna be in that sort of fraternity. You know, it's great.
It's a legacy.
Yeah.
Indeed. John David, I want you to speak, you know, to the performance of somebody who's not here, and that's Adam Driver. Can you tell me a little about Can you tell me a little bit about working with him and the process of working with him?
Yeah, I'm a fan of his, so I mean, I was kind of going in just sort of geeking out a little bit, you know, and he was kind of like giving me this energy, like, you need to calm down, young man. And I think it kind of worked though for the chemistry as he started to trust me more. And it was happening in the film as well. The trust was happening more and more, and so. You know, he's a brilliant actor. He's so intense. There couldn't be any false moments on my end. If there were, I could tell, like, the way he looked at me, I was like, I should do that again. I was lying. So, you know, he like I and like Spike, like everyone here, values process, that rehearsal process, the discussions, some of the, I don't say arguments, but the debates of characters and the way the story's going, and we tonally just being able to understand what we're trying to do, to be as authentic as possible. But, you know, the environment that was set from Spike Lee, our leader, was an environment of inclusion, you know, and we were able to be heard, and he trusted us so much that he let us go. He was letting us free, and that was really liberating as an artist, because oftentimes, more often than not, you know, actors, they have a way they want it, and that's fine, that's cool, we can deliver for you, that's our job, but when they really trust you with the material, you know, it just feels like your abilities are limitless. And Adam and I, all of us, we embrace that. We embrace that in a real way, and I think it was able to translate it on screen.
Laura, can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to be directed by Spike Lee, for those of us who haven't had that experience?
I mean, it still feels surreal to be like, we've had that experience, you know, it's such an honor to work with a genius like Spike, and he's intense, as I think most people would guess, but he's also incredibly nurturing as a director. He really allows you to collaborate and to have that conversation, to question things and to change dialogue. And, you know, there's always a back and forth about everything that we're doing, you know, as a young actor just kind of just starting to do this. That was so incredible to be able to collaborate with Spike Lee. It's really surreal and crazy. But it's also like incredible at creating the energy on set. Sometimes, you know, we were dancing and he's playing music and he's DJing and he's running around and he's hyping everyone up. And then sometimes we're in a really intense emotional scene, but he's really there and he's really supportive and makes you feel safe and trusting of everything that we're doing. So, yeah.
I know we're running a little bit low on time. I can't let this panel go without noting, of course, the weekend in which this film is being released. It's, of course, the anniversary of the Charlottesville chaos and the riots. Can you all, I just want to open it up to the panel. Do you have any feelings about, you know, not just how this film ends and what we see at the end, but also, you know, how this film speaks to that particular moment?
Well, I loved when I first read the script. Actually, when I read the script, this wasn't in there. When we first saw it, the first shot of the film was the Civil War, and the last shot of the film was in 2017. Exactly a year ago today. And only a genius like Spike could. The story of Ron Stallworth is so amazing, but then to put this other story on top of it, it is all of our story. John, David, and I were in an interview, and the guy said, who is this movie for? I didn't mean to be flippant, but I said, who's this movie not for? We're all in the same society. If anyone thinks this doesn't affect them, they're wrong. You guys are already here, you all know that. But the people watching Nightline didn't.
Well, if you don't have any thoughts, I did want to open up just briefly for audience questions, brief, and please keep it in the form of a question. All right, I'll start with this young lady right here.
You guys mentioned reading the memoir. Was there anything in the memoir that really stood out to you that maybe didn't make it to the screen that might have encouraged you to take the role even more so?
Was there anything in the memoir that spoke to you that didn't make it on the screen? That's a very good question.
There were some details that were left out, but subtly it was actually in the film. But it was a huge takeaway for me was the support that Ron received from white officers that believed in this sting operation. And what it spoke to me even more so, even doing it and watching it, is I guess it's a corny answer, but we got to do it together. We got to, whatever it is, whatever the answer is. I don't know what the answer is, but I know it has to do with everybody in this room. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir, in the middle.
You talked about it a little bit, but could you explain your rehearsal process with Spike Lee? How long was it? How did it work? Whatever you can explain.
For me, like I said, I only have a small bit of, screen time in the film, but it didn't change Spike's resolve, and it doesn't change the fact that he is a master of detail. And Spike is calling you and texting you. At one point, I'm like, Spike, I'm only there for 2 days, man. But at the same time, it forces you to, when a director leans on you in that way, it forces you to step up to the challenge. And so for me, it was a lot of talking with the costumers and the hair people, and just figuring it out, those little details. And then, a lot of it for me, though, you have his speeches and you have his rhetoric, but also it was the other things. It was, does he like his coffee black or with sugar? Or does he, what makes him smile? He was a charismatic orator. And what was it about him that made people just lean in that much more when talking about these heavy sort of subjects? And so Spike was on it about that. And then I remember the day of the day we shot, he was constantly editing and the material and the speech. And I remember he threw pages at me. He was like, Corey, learn this. And it's like, we shoot in 2 minutes. But that's just, he trusts his actors. And back to the point about his sort of history of films. You see the actors that he casts in his films. It's because he believes in them. He trusts them to do the work. And so so then he can go and do his job.
So whenever I hear you talk about your research, I'm so jealous. It's like, my research is just the worst time. What makes the guy smile? I read his autobiography, which is just insane. Ron Stallworth tried to read his biography and couldn't get through it. I thought I should give it a try, and I watched filmed interviews. And one thing I was saying is a lot of actors think you need to find something that you sympathize with the character. And I watched these filmed interviews. If you're playing the Joker or something, maybe make up something that's from his youth that gives you an into the character. The more research I did, the more I hated the guy. It was just so. I don't know. The one thing I found was I watched some episodes of Donahue from the early '80s, and he it has an audience about this size, and they hate him, and it made me realize what was so evil about this guy is that he came on and they're all booing him, and then he was kind of good with the crowd. Like, I wouldn't say by the end they were on his side, but they had changed their tone with him. And I thought, oh, this guy is so dangerous. It's not a coincidence that he kind of ran for office a couple of years after that. So it was, the research is important, but like I'm so jealous.
All right, I think we have time for a couple more. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you.
I wanted to know in what way could maybe this movie translate to some of the youth? And has Spike thought about maybe creating a curriculum or something so we can translate this?
Okay. Well, maybe we can start with reading materials. Maybe that y'all want, not those reading materials, but maybe some of the stuff that you guys went through. You think that would be helpful in the classroom? Oh, yeah. I mean,
You mean in terms of research?
yeah. Well, carrying it forward, I think that's what you're asking, ma'am. It's carrying beyond the film, so young people continue to learn about what happened and I guess the danger of white supremacy, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, my research in the activism of Black Power movement, the Panthers, and that was really inspiring for our activism of today, for me at least. And it's a different form now, but I think we can learn so much from what they did and how they organized and how they made their voices heard. And at this point, we even have a much wider platform because we can do what they did, and we can also, use social media, the internet, and everything. So I think that there's a lot we need to take away from this for sure.
Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up because we got to get to the next one. But thank you very much for being here.